Evolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
Welcome to our next episode of Evolution in Divine Love podcast. We're continuing with Chapter 3, Mapping the Soul's Unbroken Potential. Today we'll be discussing the Bhakti tradition on the soul's evolving prospect. We'll start discussing with Swami Padmanabha, the author of Evolution in Divine Love, and then with Tamal Q'enti, known to most of you as Tamal Krishna. So thank you all for joining us today. To begin this conversation today, Maharaj, in the Bhagavatam and later commentators, they emphasize that Bhakti continues to expand even after liberation. So how does this challenge a more conventional view of spiritual completion or arrival?
Well, it indeed does, because although at the same time for me, it doesn't, in the sense that true liberation necessarily must include the possibility of perpetual expansion. If that's not included, I will find it difficult to call that liberation. How liberated, how free I am in a situation when there is no more space for progress. How can I dare to call that mukshi or moksha or mukti, as we will say in our tradition? We say muktir hi tvanyata rupam swarupena bevyastitihi. That's the definition in the Srimad Bhagavatam of what's liberation. And it says, means you are free from all limiting constructs and you are fully situated in who you are and all that you can be. So that's by definition what liberation is. So yeah, we are not here saying that there is there's something beyond liberation, though sometimes we may say that way. But what we are trying to say is that to define is what does actual liberation look like? So any form of liberation, even if in our tradition, interestingly enough, we emphasize that we do not care for liberation. In other words, we are too busy loving, we are too busy serving than to think, okay, will I get liberated, when, how? And there are different forms of liberation, impersonal, personal, but in our tradition they say that Gaudiya Vaishnavism is not interested in any of those forms of liberation, even if in themselves they may include an ever-evolving aspect to them. It doesn't mean that we are not interested in that ever-evolving aspect. It means that, as we were talking before, like in previous episodes, that we already are in touch with that element. So we lost interest in thinking about trying to obtain that as if it's a final product, because we are already in touch with that living reality. So we have nothing but continue to honor, explore, serve, love that ever-evolving reality. So yeah, that will be for me the ultimate and most coherent definition of liberation.
Wow, that's beautiful. Again, that points to the previous section where you mentioned how the goal is already attained. We have already the goal has already reached us.
Yeah. And at the same time, we can always continue to reach that further and further. So we have that option, right? To think, as I mentioned in the book, I'm on my way to the goal, one option. I haven't yet arrived. Then you can think, okay, now I have arrived, which by the testimonies of those who have arrived, that never happens. They will always feel there's much more to discover. And that will be the third option. In one sense, I'm already saved, I already arrived. And in another sense, I will never arrive, because you can always arrive further. So that's a paradoxical in-between vocabulary that we need to embrace to speak about these things.
As you were speaking about liberation, I just had this question, like, what does liberation mean to me? Like, it's a word that's used a lot. And just I had this thought like, okay, wait, what does it mean to me? And I thought, okay, liberation is the kind means freedom, like getting, but freedom from what? Like, in the sense, freedom to do what we want to do, right? So
Again,
I
it's
was
freedom for something, not only freedom from something. And if it's freedom from something, is for the sake of freedom for something, right? It reminds me when Sanatan Goswami had his famous meeting and interaction back and forth with Sri Chaitanya. Basically, the very first question he presented was, "What's my duty after liberation?" Right? So he told Sri Chaitanya, like, by your grace, I'm already free. I'm liberated. So what's my duty now? Right? So that's interesting that the whole conversation started from that point, like making that case that in the context of bhakti, if you are honest and sincere, liberation is already taking place. And I remember I shared in this part of the book different quotes where we receive so much assurance from the scripture, from our teachers. There's no loss nor diminution. Wherever you obtain, it's gained. It's just, it may be a matter of time to reach perfection, though there is no end. And so on and so forth. Srila Prabhupada will say if you engage in the devotional service of God, that means entering the kingdom of God. There's no difference between devotional service and the kingdom of God. So this type of very deep reassurances to, as you say, Shredadev, like, okay, I'm freed from many times. I have many of the things I have to get free from are certain limiting ideas that we have about what we are already doing. And when you get free from those misconceptions, you realize again, oh, I'm saved. No, but you need to really get rid from those limiting notions that contradict that intuition. And then when you get a glimpse of that, then yeah, the real question comes: what I'm saved for, right? What comes after salvation? How to dedicate my life in ever fresh ways from a place of freedom from those constraints and limitations, right? It's not that after I get rid from limitations, distortions, okay, there's nothing to do now. No, it will seem less exciting than the times we were having, even with those constraints and limitations. So by nature, after I'm get rid of all that stuff that is limiting myself, the implication is I will be unlimitedly capable and able and willing and available to give my fullest self and to experience my fullest self in connection to love and everyone else's fullest self, of course.
Yeah. I was thinking, like among the different verses that you quote from Bhagavad Gita in this section, one thing that stood out to me is that I think it's 240, that one never loses the devotion. Like there's no going back, as in, like, there's, whatever we have acquired stays with us and we continue from there. And then you add, unless we do something, we act against it, something like that. So I'm just curious, like, in what way one could act against it? Is it possible that we do something that kind of goes in the reverse direction at all? Or is it something else you meant there?
Yeah, that's somehow based on a commentary to that verse by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and he will make this strong reassurance that yeah, there is no loss nor diminution in whatever insights you attain in bhakti. And he puts this exception to the rule, which is the exception is aparad. And again, I'm not using this word to traumatize, neurotize anyone. That sometimes, unfortunately, the term has been weaponized. But there's a truth to that. I mean, of course, generally, if you're honest, sincere, well-intended, that's not happening. But if for whatever reason you attack bhakti, you blaspheme verbally, mentally, physically, those who are sincerely dedicated to a life of love, that will get in the way of your experience, right? So there is a place for that. Not to be neurotic, but just to understand how much that is displeasing to love. No, it's not that my apparatus is more powerful than love, but also in its loving nature, love is not that disappears from my life, but by my own operatic nature, I will be looking in such another direction that I will unfortunately lose sight and appreciation of all that reality, which still is there available. No, it's not that at that moment God stopped loving us unconditionally, but we lose sight, we lose touch with that experience, with that reality, because of choosing to walk in another direction. Aparat basically means to walk in a direction that is not love, no? To attack love in one way or another. No, again, it can also be, as Bhakti Thakur will expand, there's jiva aparat. You can go against, act unlovingly against some souls, and that can include yourself. So there are so many ways in which we can choose unlovingness, so to say, and every time we choose that, we lost touch and sight of an ever-existent reality. But we will live as if that's not true, and of course then we have all the horrible things that human beings can do in potential by inhabiting those spaces.
And then to turn back, to be able to turn back to that
Go
reality.
back.
Yes, exactly. So much, it's not, again, just a magical thing, even though the unconditional love hasn't ever stopped flowing, but we have since then put so much in between that now we have to process all of that to be able to get back to where we, quote unquote, were in the process.
Yeah. And again, there is, let's give an example, if it helps, an analogy. Like you want to, again, it's an analogy and it's limited. You want to reach the peak of a mountain. And again, here when we talk about Bhakti, there is no ultimate peak to the mountain. You can always discover a new one. But let's keep in mind, it's a limited analogy, but you want to reach a certain peak, and you are walking in the way you are supposed to walk to reach that peak. And you are advancing, but at one point you start to walk in the opposite way you are supposed to walk. And you fall and you start to go backwards and go downhill. So in one sense, you can say you lost your advancement. In one sense, it was not totally in vain. And for whatever reason, you happen to be in that new place now, and there's something for you to learn from that place. It's not that you entirely lost everything, but because of walking in the opposite way you were supposed to walk, you will be sent by your own actions to a place that could be defined as going backwards, but also, as I'm trying to explain in my book, you ultimately, even in that going backwards or losing what I've acquired, whatever language we want to use, still there is an opportunity to learn what I actually need to learn. Because if I ended up here, it's because I did something for whatever reason that it seems I needed to do to learn the lesson I need to learn. So at the same time, as much as I can repent or lament, oh, I'm here now, for some reason I had to be there, and I need to learn something that I couldn't learn by being where I was a few minutes ago, so to say. So I think it's always important to find a positive reframing to return to the journey with renewed hope, so to say. But again, it's an analogy.
Yeah, that nothing is in vain and everything is still in the service of love, even if it's the apparent going back or slipping or turning away.
Yeah, Father Richard will say, right? We grow more by doing it wrong than by doing it right. Not that we will try to do things wrong on purpose, but many times we need to learn from that place, and it's fine as long as we can learn and grow, and we have that hope that there's always a chance to grow no matter where I am on the landscape. That's the important thing.
Yeah, like another thing you mentioned in this section is that when love is received, it naturally grows, and that even if there is no reciprocation, it grows, grows in separation or something like that. So I was wondering, like, would that be the case even, like, with jiva souls, like, who are not, who don't even like acknowledge God's presence, and when God's like loving us, and we don't acknowledge, and it is still growing?
I mean, what's the question? If love is still growing in those souls?
Yeah, when you say like even when there is no reciprocation, like it can still continue to grow. So I'm just curious if
Yeah, but I was saying that in one particular context, that of course, again, as I say before, in the case of the divine, God is always growing in his love. And even when we choose not to reciprocate, not to acknowledge his existence, their existence, the nature of unconditional love is that it's unconditional, no matter the conditions, whether we acknowledge it or not. In its unconditionality, it continues to grow. Now, it's more speaking about that side of the equation, but it doesn't mean that I mean, as we were talking many times, we are not made of love, so to say. So if we are not choosing voluntarily to enter into that arena, we are not increasing in love at every moment, so to say. It's because, again, it's a voluntary act. So until and unless we choose to step into that and to voluntarily culture that, of course, love continues to grow and expand in its own nature, but we are missing the train, so to say. So still we are moving, the soul moves in one sense that the experience is new, but it's not the exploration of the ever-evolving potential of a jiva in context to bhakti, so to say, because that's what we are talking about in this chapter. We are talking about the ever-evolving potential of the soul under the shelter of divine love. But if I'm not taking that shelter, we cannot make a case for, we are at every moment expanding in our own experience of ever-evolving love. Not necessarily. The chance is there, the invitation is always open, and the whole party is continue to grow and evolve. But also it's up to us to dare to join, to participate. New word we found these recent days, right?
Yes.
So going in a slightly different direction for wrapping this up, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes bhakti as an unending cycle of fainting and returning to consciousness and fainting again, each time tasting something deeper. So what does this imagery reveal about the nature of divine love?
Well, you have been very, very polite, I will say, because actually the analogy is about an endless cycle of drunkenness, basically. No, because it's in the context of explaining the third verse of the Bhagavatam, which says Pibata Bhagavatam Rasamalayam. So relish this nectarian juice or beverage of the Bhagavad, which is basically the love story of the divine, for eternity, even beyond liberation. And he will say, yeah, the juice is so sweet, it's intoxicating, so you will drink it until you pass out. And then when you recover from the passing out, ask for a second round, another cup, and pass out again. So what it tells that, as the Vishnu Sahasranam, the 1,000 names of God in the Mahabharata declares, one of the names of God is Dripta, which means drunk. So it means that our God is drunk. It's a drunkard in love. So he is inviting us to join him in the tavern and get drunk together for eternity. I really like this analogy. This is especially used a lot in Sufism, the imaginary of wine. to refer to love, to a very like intoxicating substance, the imaginary of the tavern, to a place that people go to get drunk, basically, as the arena of life, basically, or as a temple, which again is everywhere. So, and somehow we have that in our tradition. I recall this beautiful verse that Srila Siddhar Maharaj composed for Gadadhar Pandit to offer pranam. Srimad Bhagavati Katha Madiraya Sanjeevayam Bhatiya. He's saying, oh, on the ocean, at the shores of the ocean of Puri, Sri Chaitanya is fainting in ecstasy in divine love, and Sri Gadadhar, again, someone is fainting. He's drunk already from divine love. And Gadadhar Pandit, acting as his dearmost friend, he's giving him the wine of the Bhagavatam. And he's bringing him back to life. So somehow, probably the previous fainting was because of that same wine, and now that same wine is bringing him to life, and probably that will create the next passing out, and so on and so forth. So that language is also there in our tradition. So, and it's beautiful for me. It's a beautiful way of expressing the notion of intoxication, putting it into place, because sometimes in our daily language we may be a lot against intoxication, against substance use or abuse, and I get the point. But there is a point to speak about drunkenness, intoxication, madness, passing out for the right reasons, right? So I will say that, yeah, analogies like this are very promising, very hopeful. They give us a very, at least for me, very exciting prospect, right? Jesus will give the analogy of the banquet, of the feast, as a depiction of the kingdom of God. And probably in a banquet, you have wine on the table. Wine is a very present element in mystical Christianity. So again, a way of also through symbol and through words speaking about a reality where there is an abundance of inspiration. No, there are too many enough reasons for everyone to be brimming, no, with joy and gratitude and dedication and celebration again. Yeah. So let's ask for another round, please. Another round for table 108 here. See you in the tavern, my friends.
Welcome to part 2 of our episode of the Bhakti tradition on the soul's evolving prospect. Today we have the wonderful pleasure of welcoming Tamal Q'enti to our conversation. Tamal is a teacher, a devout Bhakti practitioner. He is launching a new website, a new way to access Bhakti teachings, and we're very excited for him and wish him great success with his endeavors. So thank you for joining us here, Tamal.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Lovely to be with you.
All right, so I'll start us off with a question and see where it goes from there. So in many of the texts in the Gaudiya canon, Bhakti is described as a journey with no end point, always expanding. So how does it feel to think of your spiritual life not as reaching a finished line, but as an eternal unfolding?
Yeah. I just make one little quick prayer before I make any other words of my own. Bande Guru Padadvandam Bhakta Brinda Samanvitam Sri Chaitanya Prabhum Bande Gadadhara Sahoditam Nanda Nandanam Bande Radhika Charanadayam Gopi Jana Samajuktam Brindavana Manoharam. Yeah, I mean, it's a deceptively simple thing you ask. How do you feel about an endless path? And Yeah, I mean, there's a great goal, a prayojan indeed shines in the heart of a devotee. I think on the path is what drives a devotee to endure the great mystery of non-attainment. There's most of the sacred path is uh, a blind faith. Maybe there will be drops here and there, breadcrumbs along the way, insights, epiphanies, encounters that are so stimulating and so meaningful that one continues to strive through the great mystery of a unfulfillment, of a blind faith that I will reach a prayojan, a finality that has been promised. I think that it's very interesting, this idea of an endless or ever expanding path. In the heart of a devotee, it's at least the way that I was transmitted the tradition, the mood with which I was transmitted the tradition by my Guru Maharaj. Prayojan is everything, that there is a finality, that there is a goal. It's like my why for endeavoring to make whatever small endeavors I'm capable of sustaining, but also my why of like, why do I choose to eat today? Why do I choose to continue to maintain my life? Is because there is a promise. The tradition and the master who represents the tradition, they make us a promise that you are invited to a finality. You will arrive to a fulfillment that you are right now existentially wounded, lacking. There is a true thirst and a true hunger and a true lacking at the level of bhav or feeling. Maybe not ontologically, the little Atman is like, bing, he's complete by himself, she's okay. But maybe we are introduced to a wounding through the Bhakti transmission. We're introduced to a sense of unfulfillment, to a sense of need and hunger and thirst for a prospect of love, and beauty and creativity that is completely unfulfillable in our present circumstance. So there is a great endeavor based on the strength of the hope that I will arrive. There is a definite finality that I will arrive to. And bless the creative mastery of Yogamaya, it will not be a static arrival. It won't be that I will arrive to the clouds of heaven and stroke a harp, the same chords for all eternity, singing hallelujah until I just choose to take birth again because it was more interesting down there. There was more variety. At least get a little suffering. Let's get a little something, a little, monotony is abhorrent to the creative spirit. And Bhakti Yoga has so much to do with creativity, this theme of ever expansiveness. So it's really deceptively simple thing. It's quite, I would say, an excellent question really to start a conversation, because it's on the one hand, yes, I understand what you mean. What do you feel like? How does it feel to be on a path that has no end? And on the other hand, it's like, well, that disturbs the very premise of why I endeavor, why I bother to eat every day, why I, once your eyes are open to the nature of suffering in the world, to the limits of mortality, it's very hard to, take the blue pill again. You can't undo the awakening that has been wrought by the grace of God. A lightning strike has riven the consciousness open and raw, and it cannot be closed up again. So the idea of not ending, it's such a driving, okay, I think of it like two pedals on a bike, there's a polarity engine. This is fundamental to the way that I teach prayer, the methodology that I developed and the way that I teach it is that there's a reconciliation of both attraction and repulsion that makes our whole heart engaged, so that I'm attracted to the prospect of a realm of pure love and pure relationship, pure identity also, and I'm repulsed by a condition where my love-thirsty soul is suppressed in its nature. So there's a healthy sense of repulsion to the mortal existence, to the limitation of the soul. The soul, when it wakes up, it realizes that I don't correspond to a realm of political strife and oppression and bigotry and projection and reactivity, and there's no real free will around me. Everyone is just kind of bluster busting their way through a heavily, grossly egocentrically biased way of life, and this is not where I belong. So the repulsion to the conditions that are constraining my real nature and the attraction to the space of conditions where my real nature might blossom together works. So it's disturbing in one sense, the idea of depends on how I hear the question. It's disturbing, a path with no end. It's like, well, I couldn't bear eternal repulsion. There must be an end to the repulsion, to the incompatible condition of absolute atemporal soul in temporally constrained conditions. There must be a realm of prema, absolute expansiveness, where there can be the suffering of longing and separation, but it's all anandamayi, blossoming. It's not contracting. So on the one hand, it's heartbreaking. It strikes the gong of my deepest grief to think about a path that doesn't have a resolution, that doesn't have a finality, an attainment, a fruit. I have made it home. The whole prospect is I'm a refugee, a pilgrim. So on the one hand, it's deeply disturbing. And on the other hand, I think, well, if I take it in the context of I won't be stuck stroking my harp in the clouds, but there will be ever fresh, perpetual expansion that's out of the limits of my present consciousness, because I'm operating with the instrument of a temporal mind. I can't really understand what is the atemporal field of perpetual expansion, but that matches. Yes, I think that would have to be there. The nature of love that I'm thirsty for would need to have perpetually new and fresh space. It would need to grow forever. So it's devastating and also enlivening, the question. And that seems to fit right into the polarity engine of how life works. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you for such a comprehensive and thoughtful response. And luckily, that is the brimming over, the expansion out of fullness is luckily the way that I also conceive of this non-final, not a tradition, a goal that doesn't end, that just keeps on becoming more and more of what it is. So there is a completion, but that completion is never ending. It just keeps going deeper. So yeah, I can understand how it would be so disarming if you would think, I mean, then it would become drudgery, really, if you think that there's no satisfaction at, after all of this endeavor, whatever, there's
Right.
there's no satisfaction. That would be torturous.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, is there must be satisfaction. And satisfaction means I have gained a great thing I was seeking, and I'm also satisfied that it keeps gaining by itself now.
Yeah.
Not that I gained it and then it dries up.
That satisfaction leads to a deeper and more fulfilling dissatisfaction, because then that dissatisfaction leads to a greater and greater fulfillment. So yeah, I'm wondering if also if you've had experience, you mentioned the ever fresh necessity to be there in our Bhakti tradition, because if not, I mean, it grows stagnant, and who would want that? I mean, forever, eternity is a really long time. So to like not have anything be new or fresh, it's going to become pretty boring. But I'm wondering if you yourself have had experience of something, perhaps a text or song or a prayer even, that you feel is ever new each time you return to it.
Yes. And I'm not in a stage. I give myself away by answering this question honestly about my adhikar. I'm not in a stage that is over the hump, so to speak, of like buddhi purvak. In the beginning, we're on this uphill journey of preaching to ourselves. It's called buddhi purvak. By your intellect, you have to convince yourself to keep trying. And at a certain moment, you crest the hill, you mature enough, and it becomes natural to sustain your endeavors without having to talk yourself into it again. And then eventually you keep going and you start tipping down, into the spontaneous, like gravity just takes your bicycle when you're going downhill. And the compelling nature of the ruchi, jata ruchi, awakened taste of love of God, compels. And I can't say that I have reached that place where it's anything that I do is consistently, any spiritual practice I have is consistently fresh and new. I would say there are things like I am bound in a sacred consecration to my Thakur, to my deities, that every day I'm compelled, like devotees are compelled, we accept different niyam-sevā, daily ritual, a daily sacrament, a daily offering. It's whether it's the chanting of a certain number of holy names or whether it's the tending of the altar. I can say that particularly tending the altar of Gaur Gadadhar, my Gadaini Mai Shashi, is the most it's very interesting because it's like on the one hand the most dynamic thing in my life, and on the other hand it's the most, dare I say, in front of them, like the most monotonous. Like it's literally the same thing every day. It's literally like I get up every day and I go through the exact same sequence of awakening the Guru Parampara and Purnamasi-ji and and then Thakur and preparing them and singing the songs to the Parampara and then singing and offering elements of nature in the same order every single day, the same songs in the same order and the same kind of sequence every day, day after day, year after year. And then collapsing the altar into rest in the night. So there's a cycle of day and night, of awakening the altar, feeding and adoring, and then in the evening bringing to rest and to close the flower. And because I'm not in a high stage of devotional development, that my experience of the freshness, of the livingness of that depends really on two factors: how much my psychophysical instrument is sensitive and fresh and alert and available to have an emotional response, because sometimes I'm depressed or I'm confused or exhausted or I'm sick or allergies or they're tamas. The instrument can be suppressed in various ways. And right now I'm not beyond the limits of my instrument, driven by spontaneous, empowered devotion. And so my experience of that monotonous cycle of everyday doing, it fluxes, it fluxes. That there are days that I'm doing it and I'm apologizing. I have actually nothing to squeeze out of my heart. I have no emotional substance to offer today. And I'm not interested, and I don't reckon that you're very interested in just doing the sequence. I'm not interested in just religiosity, and I don't reckon that Thakurji is interested in that either. But inside of the context of a consecrated commitment, there is a relationship that is constantly growing. And it grows also through periods of dryness. It grows also in times of being humbled in the fact of having nothing to offer, but still being there. And so I can only answer the question if there's an experience I have of ever fresh. I can only answer that from my low adhikar, or I don't know if it's low or not, actually. It's just, I know that there are higher stages, but I think about all the species of life and all the other stations of existence I could be in. I think maybe I'm in a very high stage, actually, for a living entity in this world. I have arrived to the shore of the lotus feet of Sri Gaur Gadadhar. It's a very high thing. And my spiritual experience fluxes and flows. But if I could zoom out, if I could take like a census or statistical analysis of my flow, the tides of my devotional relationship with the altar through the months of the year, I might see that there's a rhythm, that they are, it's at my quantum level, there's a sense of meeting and separation, in a sense of I'm meeting with success in terms of plugging in my heart, and a spontaneous feeling comes and I become absorbed with a sense of natural attachment and a flavor of reciprocity, that I can feel that God is with me and that God likes me and we like each other and we pertain to each other and we're very satisfied to be related. That's what I feel like plugging in is, having a successful, organically natural, self-arising experience of the we space, the shared space that is our space, that there's like this, they don't have anybody else like me and I don't have anybody else like them, and it's a very private and rich reality. And then other days that the faculties are, for whatever, of many, many reasons, and I might be suppressed or depressed. I don't have that access. There's too many kinks in the hose, and there's too much dust on the screen. But I would say that the relationship overall is indeed ever fresh, because I don't know what I'm going to get. Some days it's like, I don't know what I'm going to get. Some days I show up feeling really empty and they surprise me, and some days I'm surprised that my heart is so empty, and so that's also a kind of newness. But one thing that's consistently, I would say the easy answer after going on that long arc, the easy answer of something that's always consistently fresh is the prayers of Raghunath Das Goswami. Vilap-Kusumanjali, I would say, is consistently at the core of everything. The idea of Radha Nishtha, this consecration, especially unto Radhika, is consistently compelling and convincing. For almost 30 years, it's like it doesn't get old. That to me speaks of having received a living transmission of something atemporal, something that is, and it's also my faculties. I may or may not be able to access it, but whenever I turn in that direction, it's consistently wins as the most beautiful and compelling idea. I could just say, of all things, I won't say I'm so attached to chanting the holy name or worshiping the deity in bhav and ecstasy. I would say the idea of Vrindavan prema, and the idea of the service of Radha and Krishna, that is ever winner, every year, every day wins the greatest thought. As a thought, I'm just saying, from giving myself away, like where my adhikar is, where my stage is, that thought is the most wondrous thing that I know, and it continues to be. Whether or not I'm up or down, or my faculties are illuminated, or my faculties are dusty and contracted, but that thought, one way or another, shines above all human thought that I have ever encountered. That's ever fresh, the uniquely elevated position of Vrindavan Prema and Radha Dasya in particular, as like an incomparable thought in the whole history of ideas.
Wow, that's so beautiful. It reminded me of Maharaj saying in this section how once the love is received, it continues to grow, and even when there is no reciprocation, it still grows. So like when you were saying, there are days where you're not able to connect for whatever reason, and you're saying that it's still growing. So that's what it reminded me of. I have a couple of questions based on what you were saying. I was thinking, one thing is, in our Bhakti tradition, they say that the path and the destination are the same. We practice Bhakti and we arrive at practicing more Bhakti, and that continues like that. So I was wondering, what do you think in the sense of at what point that is true? In the sense, so if you're practicing now, does it depend on what stage we are to actually say that with confidence, like, oh, this, I can do this forever, and like, this, I have already arrived, like that? Or do you see that maybe like not in this life, or like, something like that? Like, do you see at a certain point that becomes a reality? Yeah, I have another question, but I'll let you share your thoughts here. And yeah.
I mean, I think that it's utterly astonishing what the Acharya Varga, what the great predecessor acharyas of our lineage have done in codifying bhakti, in giving even a general idea of the sequence, like Madhurya Kadambini, or to make any kind of statements that are firm about such an extremely subjective reality as bhakti is astonishing. It's a wondrous feat. Like Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is, it's defined in waves, the eastern wave, the southern wave, and it's like, what is he doing in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? Srila Rupa Goswami Pad is mapping the ocean. He's mapping something that's moving all the time. Like, who can do that? It's that's another thing that convinces me of like the transcendental nature of this path, is the thought of Sri Rupa and his followers and Chakravarti Thakur and so many. It's like, it's superhuman. It's superhuman. And myself as a human, it's quite I can't imagine how our acharyas have spoken about how they have codified something that is by nature extremely subjective. Every bhakta will have their own Krishna, their own experience of God, their own unfolding of the path, and yet somehow the acharyas have drawn out these like stages and elements and things so that we have some reference point, because we need that. Just like the Madhavi vine needs a tamal tree to ascend, we need some logos, some logical, codified, traditional sacred revelation that's sensible and logical. We need that for the vine of our subjective feeling to grow and to ascend. Otherwise, without Hattu Siddhanta, our so-called bhav, our feeling would just coil on the ground and like rot, basically. She has to be lifted. She embraces Tattva Siddhanta to rise. And Tattva Siddhanta is decorated by the presence of the flowering vine of beautiful Sophia, living wisdom, living experience. And so it's very hard to say at what point it becomes I cannot, like the acharyas have done, make a general statement. I don't find the power, I'm not empowered in that way to make a general statement about when I think at what stage in the devotees, a devotee would feel that their path and their goal is the same. But I can just say from my experience, my little vine can give a whisper, drop a blossom, and say that it really has to do for me with like manasika-sevā. Like there's so much warning for the new devotees not to visualize themselves, not to be sahaja and visualize themselves in a lila when we're not qualified at all for that, entirely identified with the body and the senses, etc., etc. We're very low, etc., etc. And we're warned, and yet at the same time, in the manuals on archan, which is considered to be the medicine for the neophyte devotee, it's the cure for the impersonalism that abides in the heart of the conditioned soul, is to worship the deity. By worshiping the deity, you treat the supreme absolute truth, Parabrahman, like they need something. They need food, or they need a blanket in the winter. They need, to be snug. They need to be like, they need to be adored like babies. They need to, like, food and attention. Like, they need love. They need to be loved. And like, they're the center of life. And this engagement with the deity is curative for our impersonal, like, dry-hearted tendency. Oh, God needs me in an exchange of relationship. And it's considered that archan is actually like not so advanced, that bhajan, what's really advanced is bhajan, that you chant and you close your eyes and you're absorbed in your eternal aspiration and you're consistently heart melting. And this is the high stage that is exemplified in our masters and acharyas. And it's in general considered more like Vaidhi bhakti, to take care of the deity. But even from that low stage, not low stage, but junior stage, in the like Archandipika, the manuals on deity worship, it's recommended to do manasika-sevā. It's recommended that don't just go through the ritual externally, like ding, 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 touch the feet, say the mantra, wake up, Achman, here's food, I put tulsi, ding, 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 ding. It's not sufficient to do it just externally. Even for a new person, it's encouraged, as I was encouraged as a new devotee for serving on an altar in a temple, to do some manasika-sevā, that before you do all the bell dingling and external things, first of all, visualize that I'm there, you know? And this is not considered sahaja or projecting ourselves into the eternal pastimes and pretending to be in a position we're not. It's just like, look, the book on how to take care of the deity says you should imagine doing it. You should be on the bank of the Ganga, and you know, if it's Gaurang, if it's Gaura Tattva that you're worshiping, or Radha Krishna, and you just become immersed in the faculty of imagination, which is different from speculation or fantasy. Now, speculation means you're just making stuff up, you know, and fantasy means you're dissociating from reality. But imagination means you're thinking with images. Imagination is not a synonym for fantasy nor for speculation. Imagination means, you know, we speak about, and right now we're speaking in English and we're discussing some principles that were originally codified in Sanskrit. So it has been translated to another language. And in the same way, we can read scripture and we can translate that in reflection into imagery, you know, like lectio divina. You read a little bit and then you reflect. And because ours is a personalist tradition, there is form to that reflection. There are pastimes. And so I think that the point of the one indifference of the path and the goal, where that's really true in my experience, what I can speak to with some confidence subjectively, is that I taste a satisfaction when I worship my deity and close my eyes and meditate on, if I was relieved of all the limits of my conditioning and my temporal body, and if I was subsidized by the power of their presence to be empowered with the genius and sensitivity of prema, then this is how I would offer them food. This is how I would wash their feet. This is how I would lay them to rest. This is how I would, if I could be there, if I could one day somehow be there. And then just to consider that possibility with the faculty of imagination, as has been instructed in the beginner guides of Archan, of deity worship, called manasika-sevā, I'm just with my mind doing the same seva, but there's a faculty of absorption. There's a potential of absorption that comes with that faculty of imagination. That St. John of the Cross, The Dark Night of the Soul, is a big, thick poem of his. It's a beautiful poem about Gopi Bhav, arguably. And then it's a huge commentary on his own poem. And in there, he describes this imaginal prayer also. He said it's like putting the bird of the mind into a golden cage so that it won't fly away. That if you can, for a Christian like St. John of the Cross, he would meditate on being at the foot of the cross of Christ, or of helping Jesus to stand up again when he's carrying his cross to the crucifixion, or of being present in the wonder when Jesus is at a wedding, just did like a very human affair and turns water into wine for his mother's request, you know? And just to meditate on that, it's like a lectio divina. You read a little bit and then you just imagine, you don't imagine, oh, I'm an eternal associate, I'm there with Jesus, he's my best friend. It's just like, what would it be like if I could be there? What would it be like to pertain to that space? What might it be like to pertain to that space? And it just so happens that the divine reality that our reading and our thinking is an emanation of, is pointing toward, is very generously inclined to help us understand what it would be like to be there. They're very generous. They're very interested to breathe into the sails of our attempt to empathize with their world. If we want to empathize with what it's like to have the divine couple at the center and to be fixated and fascinated with the love that they exchange and how to offer relevant ornamentation to that space, they're very, very generous in their empowerment of the thinking, you know? even if it's just a little, I think it's very generous if I get a tiny little insight. If I do that, I don't think, oh, now I'm absorbed and so many leelas are playing on my mind's eye like a movie screen. I'm just like, if I get one little insight, one little fine little understanding of what sidelong glancing is really like between the two of them, of just an idea, one little new idea sprouts, it buds from the idea. I read something, or I'm worshiping the deity and I'm doing manasika-sevā, what it might be like. And from that branch of what is known and revealed, a tiny new bud comes, a tiny little bud sprouts. And there is a sense of natural fascination and fulfillment and creative passion. Form and feeling play off of each other. So when we meditate on form, it gives, just like the tree gives room for the vine to grow, it gives something for feeling to grow on. And when feeling grows, feeling empowers our ability to think in form more richly and more precisely. So they move together. And even from a pre-bhajan stage of neophyte archan, that is, I'm just trying to follow the rules. And the rules, as a new devotee, I was put on the altar. I was afraid to do it because I didn't want to make offenses. It seemed like this is a very magical realm where I could do something wrong and put myself many steps back if I mess up. And they just gave me the book to read, and the book said, you should do manasika-sevā. And I started doing manasika-sevā, and it changed my life. It blew my heart open. It blew my heart open. The permission for a beginner to just conceive of what it would be like to be there, and therefore essentially to identify with that space. If you can appreciate that space where the prema vilas of the divine couple is going on, knowing that according to my level, I'm just trying to appreciate even the thought of that space. There's no imagination that I'm a great exalted siddha or that I'm there. It's just like, I'm just trying to appreciate what I've heard. And I'm trying to propose what it would be like if I could be there. And if I was relieved of my material limitations and selfishness entirely and subsidized by your prema, empowered by the prema of the divine couple themselves to be an ornament organically, spontaneously of their prema, what might I do? What might, and there's so much information, verses and verses and books of what others are doing that you can base on, something real, something revealed, not speculative or fantasy at all. You're just thinking in images about what has been revealed. It's just lectio divina. I'm reflecting on what I heard, what I read. That is where I think that the path and the goal are one. Because as Narottam Thakur says, what you meditate on the time of sadhana, you will attain in siddhi. And if you don't meditate on serving, if you're just distributing books and building temples and, making disciples and doing the external service to the mission, well, you actually haven't cultivated service to Krishna. You've cultivated service to the mission. And so there is a big difference between serving the mission in the Shrishti Leela of the material creation, and there's no mission to be accomplished in the perfect, absolutely fulfilled Nitya Prem Vilas of the divine couple. There's no mission. The mission is like every day, how to help them taste new love. But some would argue, that's why I say, like, how do you make a broad statement? Some may argue that in their ecstatic revelation, that preaching in this world is the same extension of that there. I wouldn't say it's not, but there are Goshtyanandis and Bhajananandis. There are people of all different natures. Apparently there's 400,000 species of human beings, which means that there's like a whole bunch of different kinds of way that you could be human. So what to speak of devotional, where you're even more individuated and more personal. There must be so many ways to be a devotee. For myself, I can only answer the question of how the path, where it feels like the path and the goal are the same, is when I can feel absorbed in what it might be like to pertain to their space and be a contributor there, to be welcome and accepted and to belong there. No, not to feel like a beggar who's far, far away, who needs so much help, because that's not what it will feel like there. That's different. What it would feel like, what's the same of the path, is what moments in my day or in my life can I feel a forgetfulness of this world and successfully absorb my heart in actually identifying with that world. Identifying through appreciation, by appreciating something deeply with avesh, with absorption, forgetting where you are. That's a bridge of identification. What you think is great, you identify with. Your heart identifies aesthetically with. So if you think this is so wonderful and it's so captivating that I actually forget that I'm a man or a woman or it's day or night or where I live, I'm just entirely for a short little time thinking about the service of my deities, of my gods, my a-devatas, in their context, not serving them in my context of this temporal world as a missionary or as a sadhaka, but what would it be like to, that's where they overlap to me. Can I participate even at a quantum level of just a glorious thought? Can I participate in their realm where they're the actual center and they are the context and not my purification or my journey or the mission to save others? That's the part that I think is the essence of where the path and the goal are the same. And then it overflows the cup. And we do have a wonderful life as sadhakas, and we do have wonderful harikatha that we share and compassion work that we do. And there's a whole overflowing that is natural extension, but secondary. It's like a side effect that's, you wouldn't want to suppress it or deny it. It's part of the taste of being alive. You know, when I cannot be absorbed 24 hours. I'm not living in Radhakund, chanting 3 lakhs a day absorbed. I don't have any power for that. I can barely hold my mind still for 15 minutes or, you know. So I need to have a meaningful life when my eyes are open too. And that should also feel like it's relevant and connected to the prem vilas of Radha Krishna. I don't want another life that's just like, oh, now I'm doing this. And at the same time, that is also an ecstatic kind of mood, like, alas, this is not home, you know? So it's all paradox, you know, contradiction.
Wow. That's so much to contemplate in what you said. I was thinking, oh, maybe I need to take a Lectio Divina space now.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm waiting to go back and listen to all of this again, but so beautiful and inspiring. Yeah, it's clear what you're saying about, you know, the difference between fantasy, speculation, and imagination. And I can see what you mean by like the path in that space, feeling the path and destination to be the same. Although you say like, yeah, there's the secondary thing also. Some of us can make do with that or start there even, you know. Yeah, very inspiring. Thank you so much for that. And other thing, what I really want to ask is, you mentioned a lot about deity service, right? The deity worship. I was thinking, is this like previously when you were talking about deity worship, how you were like, you know, doing the same thing every day, you wake up and you go through the same routine and like, you know, all of that. So, and, you know, as you're doing, even if it is same, you have a deeper experience with each day. The experience evolves or the love grows in that same monotonous routine. So I was thinking this, like, you know, deity worship, is it something that like, you know, that you would say every devotee would have to pick up, or this can be like, you know, different and each devotee can like naturally choose where they feel the attraction, or just say like, no, this is how it has to be, and like, you know, okay, deity worship, even if I'm not feeling it, just thinking that there is this promise, because of that, let me just be here and keep doing it, you know, and hope that this experience keeps getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know if you know anything about Enneagram, but there are different personality types in the Enneagram, and I'm like constitutionally uh very highest priority for me is individuality. No, not individualism is not good, but individuation is necessary. To be part of a healthy community, you must individuate and bring your own medicine, you know, come down from the mountain with your own vision to share, to make a real community. But individualism is like, I don't need anybody else, which is false. It's just not true. But so for me, as an individualist, just from the lens of my personality type, I cannot say anything about everyone, what everyone should do. And the only thing I think everyone should do is get all of the help they need to find out what's natural and attractive to them. And the only thing I think that's universal is like everybody should go on the journey to taste, see the menu of different services and, you know, ways of expressing your devotion and grab on tight to the one that is the easiest to do. Like also in the Archan manuals, it says that, or at least my Gurudev said, you should offer to the deity the food that you like, which I thought, like, at first it's like, well, why would Bengali Gauranga Mahaprabhu, or Brajavasi Radha Krishna, why would they want pizza, for example, or whatever, gnocchi? No, why would they want that? And it's like, they don't want that. They don't want your rice and dal and chapatis either. They want your feeling. So if you can offer something beautiful that you like, you're giving the most bhav, you're giving the most feeling. It's like what they actually eat is affection. So if you're thinking, this is super nice, this is really good, then they're leaning forward to receive your enthusiasm. So in the same way, I think the same thing applies across the board for devotion, which is different from some people would teach that you just need to do what your guru tells you, or you need to like join the mission and do what's necessary and like grind out the kind of individualism in you and, grind out the conditioned habits and preferences that are not really you and just do it. Just at least chant these rounds every day and these mantras and just do this thing every day, whether you feel it or not. That's there's a medicine in that. And I can't, and I don't have a taste to encourage that. My taste is like whatever you can do with your heart, with relish, grab on with both hands. And so I couldn't say that everybody should worship the deity. I do teach in general when I'm even in like bhakti, outside of broader circles than just devotees, bhaktas. I think it's a psychological necessity for the human being to reach their highest potential to settle on a sacred image of God, a primary sacred image. Like even in Tibetan Buddhism, which is basically Tantra that moved from India into the Himalayas, into Tibet, but it's an entirely tantric tradition where there's a whole pantheon of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Taras and Dakinis and things. And every Lama and every practitioner of Tibetan Buddhism, as an example, they have their Heruka, their Ishta, they have their deity that they worship. And they are, non-dualist or even like, shunya. Anyway, it's not ultimately a devotional exchange of I and thou. It's like an archetypal invoking of an archetype with which they try to fuse themselves. But anyway, the point is that I really think that anyone who's going to advance in their, even just as a psyche, to locate at the center of your cosmovision a divine image. It could be Christ, with Mother Mary, or Christ with Mary Magdalene, or it could be the green Tara of compassion, or it could be Radha and Krishna, or it could be Balaram Prabhu, it could. But the deeper that we go into our individuation process, the more important it is that there is a deity. Whether or not that is a deity on the altar, that we have an archan nishta, a commitment and a steadiness of offering formal worship, but there is some need of, centralizing our practice, orbiting a personality, because our personality is like the Atma is like the moon that reflects the light of the sun, and the sun is your deity. So you are at your best a radiant reflection, a side effect of the deity that you are consecrated to. Like Raghunath Das Goswami says, Tavai Vasmi, na jivami toyavan. To Radhika, he says, I am yours, I am yours. What I am, who I am, is that I am yours. I am Radhika's. That's my identity, primary. And after that, Raghunath Das Goswami is Rati Manjari, is Raghunath Das Goswami, is a writer, is Kundavasi, is so many things. But the first and primary thing that he is Radhika's. And therefore, all of the light that he expresses in this world, all the medicine that he gives to the collective humanity, all of that is her light in particular. Whereas someone else could be consecrated to like Balaram Prabhu, to Nityananda Prabhu, and it's like a special medicine of God. God is unlimited, and then we start to specify and individuate by selecting our deity, and then our own personality and our own gifts and our own propensities then further specify that light into the world. But it takes a loyalty, I think the essential principle, I wouldn't say everybody needs to worship deities formally, unless they have a taste for it, because it would be terrible to feel like I have to do this and I really don't like doing it. That would be very heavy for one's own heart. So much guilt would come. And I want to tell a little story about that quickly, just to reverse anything that I'm saying can also be reversed. But I think that it's essential to find for whom are you finally? And people might say, oh, for Krishna. But from a Raganuga perspective, that's not enough. It's like, you are for which associate of Krishna that serves the way you wish to serve. You cannot just say, I am for Krishna. You're for Krishna how? In the heart of our Gaudiya Vaishnava lineage is Rag Bhakti. And Rag Bhakti, the eternal associate, whether it's Subal Sako or Rupa Manjari or Mother Yashoda, who has this service mode that you would like to follow in the wake of, do the anugatya of that rag anuga, they're more important to you than Krishna. They are the way, the truth, and the life of serving Krishna. In that perspective, it's like Narottam Thakur's saying, and so many acharyas, when they're passing from this world, they want to hear the same song. And Rupa Manjari is my everything. You're not saying even Radharani is my everything. He's saying Rupa Manjari is my japa and my tapa and my dharma and my karma, the whole story of my life and all of my endeavors on the sacred path and all of my austerities and all of my prayer and everything is only for the lotus feet of Rupa Manjari. So somehow our path of individuation, of knowing ourselves spiritually, is really about refining and refining and refining. Whom do I orbit? Who is my Ishta? And it's not just Krishna. That's a great start. Yeah, Krishna, Vrindavan Krishna with flowers in his hair. Woo! If you've gotten that far on the sacred journey to be attached to a god like that, like, you're in amazingly good shape. You're very lucky. And now, how do you want to love that Krishna? And the person who is the deity of the service to Krishna that you would also like to have is really vital. And then a loyalty there. Loyalty. The name of the game is loyalty. You sing those verses to that person year by year. You count the decades that you're with that person at the center of your heart. That's what we want in our life, is to look back and count how many decades I have been clinging to you. That's what we're built of, is our decades of loyalty, and then lifetimes. But I have a god sister, a quick story about deity worship, just to opposite answer this question. I have a god sister, she's in Peru, and she's older than I am, and she was in ISKCON before, and she had acquired, as was obligatory for householders, deities of Gornitai, and they were kind of small. And because the smaller the deities get, and they're brass, so the smaller the deities get, the less fine their features can be. It gets a little more crude until you see these little Gopals, and it's like, if that's your Gopal, if that's your grandma's Gopal, and she's crying while she's holding him, she's seeing something that you don't see. Because when I look, I'm like, okay, But the smaller the deity gets to the material eye, the less fine the features are. And so her Gornitai were smaller, their features were not so fine, and out of duty, she worshipped them for years and years, and every day, every morning, she would bathe them and dress them in new clothes and offer them arti and cook the breakfast for the family and offer that to them. And she did it for 30 years with no feelings. And she told me this personally. She said, one day I was doing the seva, Gornitai, I got them down, I bathed them in a little bowl and put the clothes and everything. And she was thinking to herself, my Gornitai is not very beautiful. What she was feeling while worshiping them is, my deities are not very interesting to me. They're not beautiful to me. And she didn't have any feelings for it. She just has done it out of duty for 30 years. And because she was wistfully thinking about her unfulfillment, she put them back in the wrong places. They were in opposite places because they're both doing the same thing. It was easy to do when she's not paying attention because she's kind of in distracted by the monotony, and also maybe the guilt of like, why don't I love them, or I shouldn't be having this thought, or whatever. Religion is so complex for our poor human psyche. So she put them in the wrong places. And she told me that, and this is a college professor. She's a university professor, an extremely logos person. This is not a sentimental person. This is not like Krishna told me when I was chanting japa the other day, or like Radhika came to me in my dream and said that, this is not a sentimental, speculative person. This is like a soldier of philosophical integrity. And like, and she said, I put them in the wrong places, and in front of my eyes, they got down and changed and got in their right places. You see, they got down and they moved to correct my mistake, and they got in their right places. And I mean, my hairs are standing up instantly all over my body to tell you the story. That's all over. Very strong mercy. And everything changed in one moment. It's like watering a tree for 30 years, and then one day the fruit drops on your head. There's something that you take care of for a long time, and there's a process going on, but you don't see it. And then there's 1 second when it can come. So one path that we're told about is like witnessing our gradual development. And the other one is just like, if God has given you the mark in your heart to be loyal, even if you feel it and don't feel it, and somehow or other, like, God, I can't even believe I'm still getting up and worshiping my deities every day. I can't believe I'm doing this, actually. I don't have any feelings today, and I haven't had any feelings for many days. And like, this just doesn't feel like a miracle, but it must be a miracle, because we're also being carried, even at the time that we don't feel it. So everything changed for her in a moment. And how does she see her deities now? That she said, I did it entirely for 30 years just out of dryness and duty, without any love in my heart. And they took my steadiness as love, as loyalty. And they gave me they gave me darshan. And I saw that I was thinking, my Gornita is not very beautiful. And when they moved, I saw what they looked like, and I changed my mind.
Wow.
So what can I say? Again, you can't say for everybody. Should everybody worship deities? Like, yeah, probably. Probably, but it's a journey of patience. It's a journey of like waiting to hear your voice. How many decades, is the wine is in the cellar for how many decades before they're like, all right, it's ready. They know what they're doing. And us to show up, it's the confrontation with the mystery of the unknown that is the greatest austerity for the human mind. That is the tapasya, the austerity of faith. I don't know what's going on, actually. I don't know if I'm doing well. Like Maharaj is explaining with so many beautiful references in this part of the book about the ever-expanding flavor. And I'm just like, sometimes I feel like I'm just going further and further and further away. I have no idea what's going on. Am I advancing? I feel like in some ways I could say objectively, like I think I'm actually advancing. It feels like I'm advancing. I could say objectively I'm advancing. In other ways, I'm like, I've never been so empty and dry. I don't know what happened. Did I do an aparad? And we are in the hands of doctors. We're in the hands of mystical healers. The divine couple and their invisible representation is a mystical rehabilitation team, and the ends justify the means. And the means might be 95% unknown to us, what's even going on. Our job is just to keep showing up and exposing ourselves to the possibility of coming under their influence. So when we worship the deity, when we engage with the altar, when we pick up the japa again, even if we don't have taste, somehow or other, there's an act in that is exposing ourselves to the possibility of an influence that is not always perceptible to us, because it is by nature transcendent. We're engaging with something transcendent, and we are seeing and feeling everything through our material mind and senses. And so there can be oceans of transcendent energy washing over us when we even, distractedly chant Harinam, and we wouldn't know. There could be oceans but you don't know. And there could be not. And that's the trouble of the mind. It's like, I've been chanting for 30 years and I'm tired of it. I'm tired. I just want to pray my own prayers. I want to, meditate or something. I want to have a feeling. I want to feel like I'm, it can go all kinds of ways.
We could definitely go all kinds of ways. I mean, what you've given us today is like, I don't know, a treasure box full of beautifully cut gemstones, and we could take them out and observe them from different angles and perspectives for quite a while, for so long. Unfortunately, time is eternal, but this conversation is not, and we're going to have to bring it to a close. However, I want to sneak in one more question, because I think I'd like to know for myself, and I think it's also will be helpful to our audience too. When you were speaking about emotions, I mean, you've spoken about emotions a lot. And in my earlier education in the Bhakti tradition, if you felt anything, you were like you were a fake, you were false, it's not real, it's not a genuine feeling, you're sentimental, anything. But I don't
Like there's a kind of architecture called brutalism. Have you heard of brutalism?
I think so, but I just explain it, please.
No, just is this very boxy, utilitarian, like dystopian future kind of, and that kind of treatment of the religious heart as if you feel something, you're deeply flawed and wrong and a danger to it. It's like this is a brutalist, institutionalist kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. If you feel something, you are a danger. Your emotions are a danger. You really need to keep them under control, put them in a box, nail them shut, and ship it out to sea. But, obviously now I don't, by grace, I don't consider it that's true. And actually just yesterday I was thinking that all emotions, and let me know what you think about this, that all emotions are actually an expression of love or lack of love, one way or another, even on the human wise or whatever. But also, I mean, bhakti is a feeling tradition, and just like we can read a poem, a secular poem, and be moved by that and feel something, and like feel our heart expanding. But when it comes to reading bhakti literature, and if we feel anything, then that's really problematic. It's again goes back to you shouldn't feel. So could you kind of address this just at least for a few moments? The not, I mean, at one point you mentioned permission, that we've been given permission. Can you maybe address how it's not only permission, but it's a necessity to feel within the bhakti tradition?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad you paired those two words together because I also pair them together. Permission and necessity. It's like right and responsibility. You have the right and the responsibility. Yeah. And I would imagine that anyone who's part of this conversation, listening to this conversation, a friend of Padmanabha Swami, we are all in good company of having escaped that kind of willing submission to the oppression of our heart. Like we're not interested anymore for any kind of belonging to agree to be suppressed in our, innate wisdom, innate, conscience and feeling. And also, it's just like the definition of sadhan bhakti, kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sa sadhana vida, that it's the only way that our spiritual practices, whether it's chanting or anything else, are actually bhakti, meaning first is sadhan bhakti, is if it's striving explicitly and exclusively for bhav bhakti, which is to say the flowering of feeling. The whole entire exclusive purpose of engaging with the practices of devotion is the awakening of bhav. If it's not for that purpose, even if it's externally the same thing, it's not considered bhakti. It's disqualified from being categorized as actual devotion. You know what? Swetiti Paradik was asking before about the goal, the path and the goal being the same. Like, well, now it's entirely different. You're doing something else that's not connected to that goal. It's a different quality. What connects you to the goal is prema, means to be an embodiment of that feeling, to have a divine body that is the soul and the body and the feeling are all one. There's not a difference between the flesh and the soul and the feeling. It's one thing. That's the goal. The bridge to get to that goal is bhav, which is to say that the awakening of identification with that possibility, the full-flowered awakening. You haven't gone there yet, but the awakening of that. And the way to get there is practicing with that singular purpose. I want bhav. So the thread that connects the entire thing is the priority of feeling. Not just whatever feeling, it's a feeling of, the movement of rich emotion that is a seva vritti. It's specifically, bhav is described as three tastes, that the heart likes to taste. It wants to taste. What kind of feeling? If someone's to say, your feeling you're having is very dangerous for yourself, you're being deviant, and you will also confuse others and destroy the mission or whatever, you just check. The feelings that we are to have are, what is it? Bhagwat Parsha Deha Praptabilas. The heart melts with a feeling of aspiration, abilas. Oh, I wish that I could have the body of an associate of my deity. I could be a Brajavasi with flowers in my hair and a form that's made of Satchidananda, made of the same quality as the divine couple, so that I match with them. Oh, I would love to have that. And gosh, I haven't thought about this in a while in terms of Sanskrit. Anukulamai cheshtabilas, that I want that all of my activities will be favorable for them. I want to have a body that's pleasant to them and expresses the beauty of genius and feeling, an embodiment of divine feeling. And I want that all of my activities are favorable to them, and sohardabilas, and I want deep affection for them. I want to share profound affection. I want that all my activities are favorable to them, and I want to have a body that can express that. Those three tastes are what constitute in their super concentrated form. When those things are braided together and constantly moving, that is bhav. I want to be with you in a body that can serve you, O Krishna, Radha Krishna. I want that everything I do, from the way that I articulate my phrases to the way that I cock my head and the way that I turn my wrists, I want that everything that I do is pleasing to you. And I want to share a profound bond of mutual affection with you. Those kind of feelings, from the goal all the way down to where we are, that is the path of bhakti. That is what unites the stages of sadhan, bhav, and prema. The entire thing, if it is the thing, is feeling. And then we have practices and tattva siddhantas and ways of orienting our mind and our will that align us with the possibility of developing that feeling. And there is no other prayer. A devotee who has arrived to the conclusion of what this Gaudiya darshan is, what this cosmovision is, and the goal of it and the purpose, who has comprehended the tradition of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, they have no other prayer except that my feeling should grow. My passion and my spontaneous attraction and my feeling for you should grow. And there's really nothing else is of concern. Whether I live or die, or I'm successful or not in the world, at the soul level, on the internal level, because externally we may have duties to our family, to our society, things that are going on by themselves, by fate, in a way, we're just implied and you take care of it. And it's medicine, it's important, it's not unimportant. But at the soul level, all the way down in the seat of the heart, there's one candle lit, one purpose. And it's only that my feeling should increase for that Vrindavan prema. So the entire thing is only that. And that's what makes it different from gyan, or karma, or another path. That's the speciality of bhakti. That's what makes it bhakti, why it's a different substance, and what actually links us to the spiritual world, and what's the proof of our initiation. Because nowadays there's many confusions with guru and sampradaya, and these ones say that this lineage is not real, and these ones so many people have issues with guru tattva, and it's everywhere. It's a calamity of unclarity and trauma and difficulty, and we can question, do I have a real living link or not? do I have an intact connection to that world or not? Because if I don't have it, I'm just drifting in space in my own speculation, which is like a vacuum of hopelessness for the devotee's heart. Am I linked or not? Is my initiation valid or not? You know, the initiation symptom, as far as I can tell, is that you can see that there is you have been pollinated with a feeling for that feeling. If you have a living feeling for that realm, you are connected to it. That's what connects. That's what connects, because you can't have that unless you've received it. Unless grace has given it to you, the souls of this world don't constitutionally manifest that on their own. Whether it's inherent or inherited, a whole other topic. It is awakened. It is there. An awakening is transmitted. Alchemic pollination definitely occurs from another world, from another realm of Vrindavan Prema to our heart. And we start to empathize with, identify with, by appreciation, the feeling of Vrindavan. And that's the proof that your initiation is alive, has taken place. Your soul has been quickened by that linking, one way or another, through whatever Yogamaya's tricky means are. She has linked you, and now your entire and exclusive purpose is to tend that feeling and develop that feeling. So the entire thing is only feeling. And Siddhanta and sadhana and all these things, like when they try to catch Jesus on the Sabbath, picking up grains of wheat in the field, moving as a renunciate with his friends, village to village, healing everyone. And the orthodoxy was chasing after him to watch him break a rule so they could punish him. They were picking up fallen wheat in the field and eating raw wheat just to stay alive to serve God another day. And they said, "Ah, you're harvesting on the Sabbath." And he said, the law was made for man. Man was not made for the law. God did not create us to serve the religion, to serve the rules. God created these law books and this tattva siddhanta and philosophy and practices to serve us who he loves, his people, the soul, the living being that's actually beautiful and desirable by God. Religion is a prop made by God to serve us, at our service. At service to what? Our feeling, because we are the vine that grows up, the pillar of the tradition. The tradition and its practices and its vision, its darshan, are all planted in this world to give us the chance for us to grow, because it's us who will enter into the presence. There is no contradiction of philosophy there. There is the banning of Krishna at the gates of the Kunja there. Everything reverses there, but we will enter. We pertain. So.
Wow. So much. You've given us so much to think about. The one thing I really appreciated, I mean, many things, but what you just said now is that we have a feeling for the feeling. And that was
That's
great.
enough.
That was really beautiful.
That's actually all we have. That's our treasure.
Yeah.
That's our great wealth and our glory. And what we have to work with. What we have, it's on the one hand like the most powerful thing in this plane, and also it's very delicate. It needs so much care. But the feeling for that feeling is everything.
Yeah, because that really brings it right home down to where we are right here, right now. What is our feeling for the feeling? So beautiful. Thank you for that. And we are going to have to take a pause here, and we will offer some contemplation questions for our audience after this session is over. So I so appreciate you coming here and sharing your heart with us, Tamal. And would you like to leave your website address?
Yeah,
Here,
sure.
I'll put it on the screen afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I just want to thank you both so much for the chance to sit together and churn these topics. I feel like I had a good smoothie. You know, the chance to talk about these things feels very nourishing, a lot of vitamin, spiritual revitalization. As every time it's like a godsend to be able to have these conversations. It's like truly a godsend. And so I'm grateful to you both for the invitation and holding the space, and to Maharaj for all that he does, and his beautiful friendship for myself and for so many of us on our very personal path of personalism. And yeah, so first of all, thank you. Yes, so much thank you. And to any friends that want to connect who are watching, we can connect further. I have a wisdom school, Sri Ramana Purnima Wisdom School, which you can find through my website. tamalq'enti.com, tamalq'enti.com. There's a little button that says Wisdom School, and it's just a space where I systematically, today we're having this conversation is like painting with broad strokes, you know, we're touching really huge themes and feelings and things, but it's also trying to do the pillar work of systemizing, creating methodologies and opportunities for the feeling to grow. So I have my way of doing that, my particular idiosyncratic or eccentric or whatever it is, Sri Ramanoprima Wisdom School, and tamalq'enti.com. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thank you. So now we will take a pause and offer some contemplations for you to be able to bring this knowledge into your world. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for another episode of Evolution in Divine Love podcast.
Day, Radhe.
Reflect on your favorite statement from this section and delve into its deeper implications. When you feel you have reached the limits of your understanding, turn to prayer, seeking further revelation from the sweet Absolute. Listen attentively for his response, and then thoughtfully consider how to translate the insights you receive into meaningful action.